Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Crow, multimedia editor at Progressive Grocer. Welcome to Top Women in Grocery, a podcast focused on the topics, trends, and interests moving women forward in grocery retail. We're spotlighting extraordinary women in the grocery industry who have had successful careers and interesting lives, and who are also making a positive impact in their workplaces and in their communities. I'm here today with Khadijah Abdullah, Vice President of Economic and Social Impact at retail technology company Shipt, where she's responsible for corporate and social responsibility initiatives related to food security, economic mobility, sustainability, volunteerism, and community engagement. She also oversees Shipt's grant-making programs. Khadijah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Emily, for having me.
Of course. To start, I'm hoping you can tell us a bit about your career journey and how you landed in your current role with Shipt.
Yeah, Emily, that's a fun question for anybody who knows me. The best way I always want to give a precursor to anyone who's paying attention is I have to borrow a line from Sheryl Sandberg and say that my career has been nothing like a ladder and closer to a jungle gym. Although for me, every step along the way has been intentional. I think to anyone who's viewing it outside will probably think that I probably navigated quite a few lives. So I'll briefly kind of share a little of my background. So I started off my career as a cardiovascular pharmaceutical rep. And I was loved it, very young, have a STEM and psychology background. And it was just a cool job at the time. And in search, I found myself, which is going to be a perpetual trend in this conversation, is seeking something more fulfilling. And then Hurricane Katrina happened. And like so many of our neighbors were in need, and I found myself leaving my job, probably to my father's dismay, and I found my calling as a high school STEM teacher in Louisiana. And so I met my students and their families, and honestly, I just became so proximate to the intersection of all the systems that contributed to poverty and prevented families from accessing their full potential. And so that was probably the spark inside of me that just really drove everything else that I've probably done to date. And so I did that for a few years, saw my students go from 30% of my students graduating and passing the high school graduation exam to I think 82% by the time I'd left the classroom, and was just so excited for them. And so I left in hopes of thinking about how can we make a bigger, more significant change. So I went to law school, very typical. And so I ended up practicing law for a larger retail company for just about a year. But again, same thing, found myself searching for that spark again. And so I found myself back in the education on the nonprofit side to the same organization that initially recruited me to become a teacher. So I ended up running kind of our teacher leadership development kind of arm. And then that grew into running the organization for the state of Alabama and Georgia. And I did that for about a decade. And then the pandemic happened. And most of us can probably remember where we were in the pandemic.
Yes.
And so you imagine public education had a lot of things happening during the pandemic. And so the pandemic happened, and then George Floyd also was happening. And so I was doing my best to navigate and support superintendents across the country and think about how to support our educators. But companies alike were also considering their role in ensuring that teams and their company were living into their purpose. And actually, that's how I found Shipt. I connected with our previous CEO, and she and I connected to just have a brief conversation because I was doing some consulting work. And honestly, they connected with me. It seemed like it was just a really good merger for us. And I've been honored to stand up for our economic development and social impact work since.
Wow, that is an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
And you are the first person at Shipt to step into the role of VP of Economic Development and Social Impact. How have you approached taking on that role, and how are you making it your own?
So as I mentioned, companies were trying to figure out where they were going to play a role. And it was just, given my unique kind of background, it was a really good transition. While Shipt was doing some community engagement work and had a couple of team members who were doing that work on the marketing and the communication side, it was really neat for me to stand up this work. And so when I joined Shipt, we had just outlined our core values and our purpose statement. And our purpose statement, which was honestly the thing that sealed the deal for me, was sparking the connections to show how everyone counts. And so that was oh, I'm in. This is what I want to do. And so that became the ethos and foundation of how I approach my role And I spoke to so many of my peers in the field in preparation for this role. And many of them shared that often roles like the one I'm in can sometimes come across as fluff. Ouch.
Mhm.
Right. And made a nudge to make sure that I was thinking about it in terms of what was core to our business as well. And so, in leveraging my previous work experiences and knowing that this role would be vital to ensuring that our work both be aligned to our business objectives, but also connected to what most meaningfully mattered to our internal team members and external stakeholders, specifically consumers, our community partners, and then the wonderful folks who choose to shop and drive for Shipt. My approach essentially became prove that in our business we can both do good and well. And so that meant that my team and I spend our time regularly with our business partners, understanding our business objectives and capabilities, social impact trends, HR insights, consumer insights. And that's how we set our strategy in a way that's synergistic to our business. And it's been a lot of fun. It keeps us on our toes. And we're always kind of navigating some pieces, but it's been an interesting journey for sure.
Great. And Shipt was part of the White House Conference on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health that happened recently. Can you tell me a bit about the commitments that were made by the company as part of that endeavor and how that's all panning out?
As it relates to the White House Conference on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health, our team was doing our work, and I'd written kind of some of my own dreams, and it was like, oh, what would it be like if this administration was talking about the work that Shipt was doing? And we had heard about the White House Conference and that it was coming up, and I knew that this was a big deal from some of, my own background, but my teammates and I talked about it because the White House Conference on Hunger, this was the second conference ever in the history of our country. And I want folks to sit in that because the first conference was where the free and reduced lunch, the first conference was 50 years ago. Let's start there. It was 50 years ago was the first conference. And that is where the free and reduced lunch program actually was created out of that. And so we knew that this was a huge opportunity given our commitment to food security and given the work that we do. And so we made 4 distinct commitments that I'm excited to share have made a lot of progress since we made that. And so I'll do my best to kind of walk you through it and then feel free to pause me if you need to. But the first one was very much just connected to just who we are as a business. We started as a small business, and we know that it's really important to support small businesses, thinking about mentorship, thinking about relationships and connections. And so coming off the heels of the pandemic, we saw a lot of small businesses have to close their doors. Local retailers had to close their doors because they couldn't compete in the e-commerce space. And so we saw a great opportunity to do our part and accelerate some of these small businesses through a program called Ladder Up. And that was an accelerator that supported e-commerce growth of these local retailers and helped them just continue to compete and evolve in the marketplace. And so our commitment was over 3 years. We do at least 10 a year, provide $5K a year to help them kind of reinvest in some of these capabilities, but they also receive mentorship from industry leaders and courses each year. And so that was a really cool one for us because it was almost like us supporting businesses to kind of show up how we, to support businesses to thrive and evolve in the ways that we've been benefited. The second one was supporting nutrition research. And so I'm a bit of a nerd. I'll be candid on that one and that's connected to, I'm a science person. And so we asked ourselves a question of how can we leverage delivery while also supporting communities most in need, right? So thinking about this doing good and well. And so we partnered with the University of Michigan as they were doing a research pilot to provide some preliminary kind of evidence on the acceptability and impact of home delivery of healthy foods for people with type 2 diabetes. And the reason why that's a really big deal, as many of us can figure out, is you're already navigating a health condition. Our business is uniquely set up to deliver food, but what we found is the headline is when you provide people with healthier access to food, they're actually going to live healthier lives. And I'm thinking about one particular person, Tanya, who shared that, who's managing her type 2 diabetes, who specifically said, I get up in the morning and I'll have my muffin. And that was her go-to. In partnership with the University of Michigan, folks received not only healthy membership, Shipt memberships, free Shipt memberships, but they also received monthly credits through our Healthy Choice Allowance program. And Tanya is one of the good people who could probably tell you just now she was like, instead of going for that muffin, which I know is going to spike my insulin, I'm now, choosing to eat healthier, choosing fruit. And so was able to kind of demonstrate when you give folks resources access, you provide accessibility for it, they're going to make smarter and healthier choices that are actually going to have longer outcomes for their lives. The last two, and I'll be brief, is fostering healthy choices. Mm-hmm. And so that is, again, doing good and doing well. We know that folks use delivery even more, and it's been growing. And so we committed to update our Shipt marketplace to say, I'm a busy mom, I'm a busy family, and I'm going online to get food delivered to my home. How can I make it easier if you have a family member with a gluten allergy, or mm-hmm. you're trying to focus on a keto plan? And so what we did was make meal planning and healthy specific dietary needs easier. So now you can search those things on our marketplace. And then the final one, which has been a labor of love, Emily, for the last 2 years, is we expanded access to our community of individuals who use SNAP-EBT. Okay. And that has been, we made that commitment. We knew it was important because there are over 80 million folks across our country who leverage SNAP-EBT. But we believe, given our own commitment, how do we, given everything we've learned through some of our other research, make delivery more accessible? And so it took 100 plus team members over the course of 2 years to build this out at Shipt. And I know a lot of folks, you just see it and it happens. And
right.
It was a lot of work across our business. And so we wanted to build something intentionally with empathy. And so we even launched some of our early work by taking some of our product team and our engineers through a hunger simulation program to make sure that they understood we're not just building a product. We're building something that is going to change people's lives. And so we want to build it in a way that's going to be impactful for them. And so we're excited to be able to launch SNAP-EBT nationwide this past summer. And in addition to making it accessible and making sure folks can leverage it, we also knew that we recognize folks want to be maybe a little bit more price conscious. And so we are offering it at half the price of our regular membership for folks who use SNAP-EBT. So now they can get it for $4.99. And that's not a limited time offer. They can get it unlimited on our marketplace. And so, as you can imagine, I'm really excited about how intentional Shipt has been in terms of not just doing well as a business, but doing good in our community.
Absolutely. And I want to go into that SNAP-EBT payment option a little further. You've obviously been a part of a lot of initiatives that work to combat food insecurity. What can you tell me about the SNAP-EBT project and other projects you've led and how they are affecting local communities?
I probably can't say enough on the SNAP-EBT piece, but I think it's just been a cross-functional effort to ensure that we're able to notify and let folks know that they can receive this benefit. We did our research in understanding what is this audience that in this consumer base that we want to connect to and make sure folks can leverage it, and seen some early kind of indications that folks want it, but that $4.99 price mark has really limited or maybe reduced the barrier.
Okay.
That folks might experience. And so that's just one of those products. But as you mentioned earlier, we launched our grants program since I stood up this work. And over the last 3 years, we've actually nearly doubled our grant making. This year alone, we're supporting over 26 organizations, local organizations, in over a dozen communities nationwide with a focus of food security and workforce development, which has been great. In addition to our Ladder Up Accelerator program, which I mentioned has already, we're just finished our second year. We've had 20 local retailers. Wow. We've also, making sure we're taking care of our backyard. So we're located in Birmingham, Alabama. And a lot of the things I've kind of mentioned are very much connected with our community. Birmingham has 99 neighborhoods and significant I think we're shifting away from using the word food desert, but I know it resonates with individuals as in terms of we understand it. And so we think a lot about how do we actually support our community in our own backyard. And so we recently announced $1 million over a 5-year partnership with an organization called Birmingham Promise, which is a commitment to ensure that any student that goes to Birmingham High School, City High School, will not see finances as a barrier to go on to a post-secondary option. And so we're really excited about that because that's last dollar scholarships for every single student that graduates from a high school in our hometown. And so that's big for us. And we didn't stop there. We also recognize that it's not enough to just provide funding. We actually have to match it with mentorship. And so we launched a program called the Magic City Mentorship, our first time across the city schools, and have partnered with a couple of schools this year and gotten volunteers out. And what we've seen is for the students, we surveyed them, 60% of them had said they'd never had a mentor before. And 100% of them said that having this program this past year has shifted their thinking in terms of how they're thinking about post-secondary options. And so that's big for us because the money was there, but students weren't accessing it. And so there's so many different ways that we are committed to continue to show up across our headquarters as just like a microcosm of the macro across our work. And so those are just a few examples. I won't over inundate it, but there's just some really cool things happening at Shipt.
That's amazing. You mentioned earlier how everything is intentional, and it sounds like you're making those choices very intentionally to help your local community. Yeah. And switching gears, you mentioned mentorship among local students. I'm curious how mentorship has affected your career, and how do you approach mentoring or lifting up other women coming up through the ranks of the industry?
Yeah. Mentorship is, the only way I can say is when I think about how it's impacted my career, it's like one word: immensely.
Oh.
Mentors, Emily, mentors show up in lots of different ways.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're official. Someone reaches out and says, "Will you be a mentor?" But a lot of times the mentors just show up when you least expect them. Yeah. They're usually not official. And then when you look up, you're like, wait, I didn't recognize we were in this relationship. And so I think about my own career. I've had just like people who are whispering to me, who might pull me aside after a meeting, who might be willing to look at a presentation or kind of push me. Those are those sometimes those unofficial mentors, but I can think of two stories when I think of how it's shown up. One, I look back at our Ladder Up program. Mm-hmm. And when I first joined Shipt, one of the things that I was thinking a lot about was this piece around SNAP-EBT. So this has been long-term thinking. Mm-hmm. And there's an individual who actually just went through our Ladder Up program, Jimmy Wright from Wright's Market in Opelika, Alabama. And I got Jimmy's information and asked Jimmy, and I said, I'm trying to figure this out. And I feel like you may have figured it out, but your name keeps just circling in circles as someone who's doing some really cool work in West Alabama. Can we hop on the phone? And Jimmy was a wealth of knowledge. He didn't know me, I didn't know him, but was able to just pick up the phone and actually helped our team do some initial kind of research and navigating. Jimmy ends up getting in our cohort this past year, and we're, all the mentorship, the industry leaders, and it didn't just stop there. And so at some point we're sitting in the cohort and we're listening, and Jimmy is offering additional advice to others. And so it's interesting that even when you are thinking you are providing some mentorship, which is what the program was supposed to be, you actually see how it can actually be mutual. And so that was really cool. But the other story that I want to share is I mentioned that I was in the education space for some time. And I had a number of students that I got a chance, or teachers, or, individuals that I got to engage with a lot. And there's one student, Barucha Sanchez Velasquez, who was the first in her family to graduate from high school. And she was the first in her family to graduate from college as well. And I met Barucha when she was, I think, a 10th grade student. Just randomly, I was doing a school visit, and one of her teachers was like, "Hey, this, I think I'd gone on campus to speak on her high school campus to speak about something, and she really wants to know, can you come back? Because she'd like to meet you." And decided to take off the afternoon and went over there after school and just sat with her after school. And little did I know that this person would stick with me probably the rest of my life, because she did. And she's like, "Yeah, I'd just love to talk to you about, internships and just how do you navigate things." And, I talked to so many different folks, and a lot of us do. But what she taught me was, don't ever get too busy to mentor and connect with folks, because you really never know what's going to happen. And so she followed up, and I was like, "Yeah, we'll get back together." Week passed, 2 weeks passed. She followed back up again. "Hey, just making sure you hadn't forgot about me, Miss Abdullah." Long story short, Barucha, of course, graduated from high school, supported her and helping her to kind of navigate as a first-time college goer, getting into college. She went to her first tech conference. Spoiler alert, she's an engineer at this point in her career. But she goes to this tech conference, and she's like, "What would Miss Abdullah say?" She's telling me the story. Yeah. And she's like, and I went with her to pick out her first outfit for her interview. And she said, I walked right up to that table and I introduced myself. And she said, surprisingly, she's like, I walked out with like 3 like interviews ending that day. And she was like, I was just so excited. And she said the night ended and it was time for me to get dinner. And I was kind of nervous, but I think about like all the things you said is like stand up tall. And she said, I went downstairs and I ordered myself a steak and I sat at the table by myself and I was okay. And so I share that story, probably a little too long-winded, but just we never, I think when I think about mentorship, it's not always just about what we give, but it's also what we get back. But I think the thing that I think about it is just the power of lifting folks up and not getting too busy, because I think it's easy to just move around and do your work and not recognize someone's done it for us and it's our responsibility to do it for others.
I love that. I think you're right that we don't always think about different forms of mentorship as opposed to just a very formal relationship. It's amazing how much you can learn both ways. Yeah. Well, to conclude, you were recently chosen as one of Progressive Grocer's top women in grocery for 2024. Congratulations. What does it mean to you to have been chosen as a top woman in grocery?
Yeah. Emily, this is probably my most succinct answer because I sat and thought a lot about this question about what does it mean to be chosen as a top woman in grocery. And, honestly, it's just a sincere honor. I shared about my jungle gym career and I've had moments, probably similar to many other folks, where it can be kind of scary to switch careers midway through your life. And I'm honored to work for a company that sincerely cares about our community, who's created space for us to innovate in the ways that we touch our community, and actually allow me to kind of carve out a space that's different. And so what an honor to be named among another group of, I don't know if I can say what I'm going to say, but kick fill in the blank women who are just, doing such amazing things. And, there's like this story about mirrors and windows. And so I think it's important for us to be mirrors when you think about mentorship, but also windows. And so I think about the Top Women in Grocery Award and the opportunity to be lifted up as a person who's doing community work for other folks who are in this work, who are thinking about how they can innovate in their business. So just thank you so much.
Wonderful. Khadijah, thank you so much for being here with us and for sharing all of your insights.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. This was great.
Great. For more information about the Top Women in Grocery podcast, please visit www.progressivegrocer.com/podcasts. You can also subscribe to this series wherever you typically listen to podcasts, including on Apple, Google, and Spotify. Finally, do you have an idea for a Twig podcast topic? I'd love to hear from you. Email me at ecrow@ensembleiq.com. See you next time, and thanks so much for listening.